everybody. Welcome to our first episode of Banter and Brews. I'm Will Tarver, and I'm sitting here with my dad, having a Budweiser, kind of like kicking this thing off, So a little backstory here. We're with Tarver Distributing. My dad can tell us a little bit more about that later on. And we started out as an Anheuser-Busch distributorship. So, Dad, you want to, I've heard this story like 1,000 times. So, you want to kind of kick things off with the story?
Well, we still are a primary Anheuser-Busch distributor. It's still probably still about 92% of our overall business. But all started back many, many years ago in the city of Knoxville, Tennessee. Your grandfather and your grandmother originally were from Knoxville. Dad, at the time, prior to World War II, Dad was in the beer business in Knoxville and started, I think, on a beer route when he was 18 years old. Stayed on that beer route until he was joined the Army to go into World War II. Did his time. He served actually in the Battle of the Bulge. He was one of my heroes. He was a true patriot of the American spirit. Came back from World War II, went back into the beer business. It was sort of funny at that time. Anheuser-Busch, back in those days, were distributed locally by either grocery distributors or soft drink bottling companies, which is a little ironic because we're sort of almost going back that direction in an opposite manner now. But Anheuser-Busch back in the mid-'50s had a real initiative to try to get their distributors solely focused on the beer business. So they were trying to migrate their business toward solely focused wholesalers. They started getting away from some of the soft drink companies and some of the grocery companies. There are still some grocery companies out there that still have the brands today, but back in the mid to late 50s is when all this was occurring, and this honestly is what brought up the opportunity for the Cleveland market. Your grandfather was recognized early on by a Anheuser-Busch region representative. His name was Bob Beasley. Back then, that region was actually he was a district manager. I'm sorry, but that district manager serviced about 4 or 5 states. Well, at that time, Bob Beasley got an opportunity at the Chattanooga market. Your grandfather, which everybody knew him as Rabbit Tarver, had the opportunity to start the distributorship, which we now have now, back in the early 62. The official date was April 2nd of 1962. Dad had met your grandmother at Tipton Distributing at that time, which bought the beer distribution rights from Smoky Mountain Beverage, which at that time was an RC bottling company. Dad sold his shares of Tipton Distributing, which gave him the starting capital to start the distributorship here. Our first warehouse building was there in the 5 Point area. If people know where the museum center is right now, or the Bradley County Rescue Department. Bradley County Rescue Department then was the old Hall Chevrolet building, and Dad rented a warehouse space at that time from the Robinson family, and it was a feed store. It's across the street from the depot. That spot now is basically a parking lot of the museum center. A lot of things went on at that warehouse. Probably don't have time to go on. There's a lot of stories, a lot of fun stories. But we were located there across from the depot. We were there from 1962 to 72. And like I said, when we first moved to Cleveland, your grandfather and grandmother, my mother was 7 months pregnant with me. So I was born that June of that year. Times were hard. Business, obviously, we didn't know many people in Cleveland. Dad spent countless hours in the bars in the evenings when people got off work. There was no such thing as grocery stores or C-stores at that time. You sold beer across the bar, probably 99.9% of the beer we sold were at bars. And Budweiser at that time was not the primary beer sold. Pabst Blue Ribbon, Sterling, Falstaff, Schlitz was a huge brand back then. But Budweiser and Miller High Life, for example, were two brands pretty far down the list as far as popularity. A lot of that started changing in the 70s. We were at our first location for 10 years. We moved from there in 1972 to our second location off 20th Street over next to Jackson Manufacturing. Our building that we built there was the site for the county fair. That's really where I started working. That was my first warehouse that I was actually working, driving a truck, making sales calls and things of that nature. And that's sort of where I guess the second generation started getting more active in the business.
Okay, cool. Now, when y'all first moved to Cleveland, just some information for the audience here. We're actually filming here at Dad's house, and our further episodes will continue to be here upstairs in this house. Where were y'all living when you first got here into Cleveland? Just curious.
You know, that's a humbling testimony, but probably the first year I was alive, we lived in a basement efficiency, just really off the Lee College, Lee University campus. And that house is still there today. It was a basement efficiency, one bedroom, one bath, with a little kitchen efficiency. We moved from there to a little rental off of 64 Highway. And then we actually moved, prior to my second birthday, we moved here in the Tasso community, which the same property, we're still here on the same property. Of course, we lost that house due to a tornado in March 2nd of 2012. But I've lived here pretty much all my life, moved here when I was 2, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, but had a lot of fond memories but a lot of rich history. You know, there's our first year in the business, I like to tell people, your grandmother and grandfather sold 36,000 cases of beer their first year in business. We now sell that in a matter of about 8 to 10 days, which, you know, when you put that into perspective, none of that could be possible without hard work from our dedicated employees, our valued retail customers, and obviously it takes dedicated supplier partners.
Oh, yeah.
Anheuser-Busch has been one of those partners that have been steadfast through so many years, and it's still today our number one supplier.
Oh, yeah. Now, I know plenty of times working in the warehouse. When I first started, I believe it was 13 or 14 years old. I got into the warehouse, got my uniform, got my first paycheck, and I was sweeping behind guardrails and mopping floors. What did Grandpa Rabbit have you doing?
A lot of similar things. Everything nobody else wanted to do. You know, we spent a lot of times. We always knew when we had the brewery coming in for some inspections or visits. We got out of school, particularly myself and my 2 younger brothers, Ed and Bill. We were busy cleaning the warehouse, sweeping, mopping, digging in the corners, making sure everything was organized and ready for the brewery to come in and do their inspection of the warehouse. I felt that they raised me correctly in the business, and I've tried to do the same thing with you and your knucklehead brother. I
think it's hard to understand the ins and outs if you don't start like that. So no, I mean, I probably, I never would cuss you or anything like that, but I probably thought it a couple times while washing trucks out in the heat in the summer. But now, when did all that kind of start changing for you? What got you out, cleaning rat traps and sweeping the floors to?
Now you start telling us some of the stories. Honestly, there were so many different things that evolved in my responsibilities. One of the major things, Dad got diagnosed in the early 80s with cancer, which changed a lot of things. everything about my world then started changing, and along with my younger brother Bill, we both started taking more management leadership training classes with Anheuser-Busch. We started going through a sort of a fast track of an approval process. And I think still to this day, I may be one of the younger approved successor managers with Anheuser-Busch. Probably prior to my 21st birthday, the application was written, and I was probably over 21 when I finally got approved.
Wow. Okay. I knew you were young. I wasn't sure that young. Wow.
Yeah, pretty young. But you know, there were a lot of people, you know, nobody goes through by themselves. I was very lucky and fortunate that I had a great supportive peer group with Bob Beasley. I leaned a lot on him. Also leaned a lot on Stuart Wood up in Holston Distributing. I had a lot of folks that I could reach out to if I had questions. They were quick to give me the right answers, and I was always willing to listen. Mm-hmm. You know, was very fortunate. Our group of employees were much smaller than we are now, but I will have to say they were a very dedicated group of individuals. We first started, you know, Mom worked the office much like what she did in Knoxville. Dad ran a route, and we had two other guys that ran routes, Stan Lewis and Ellen Heron. Stan Lewis was our first employee back in April. He actually came from the existing beer distributorship here in Cleveland. I think he was with them 5 years before he started working for us. But sort of a fairy tale story, really. I could compare our distributor story much like it's the true American spirit success story, because Mom and Dad really didn't have a whole lot. They just knew how to work hard, apply themselves. Quit wasn't in their vocabulary. And they went through a lot of trying, turbulent times. We had a strike. I remember one back in the 1972, I think there was Slits and Anheuser-Busch went on strike. And that was a big challenge. We went weeks without any beer to sell, and we had employees depending on us, you know, to make their living and support their families. And fortunately, we pushed through that. We had a lot of help from our local financial partners. We're very fortunate. Of course, Bobby Taylor was at the helm at Merchants Bank at the time. Those that had been around Cleveland for a long time, and Bobby Taylor was such a good friend of your grandfather, and he helped a lot through some of those trying periods.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So I've never heard about the strike and the outages like that.
Actually, that's where Miller Brewing Company got a real toehold in the marketplace. They used to sell this 7-ounce product. Got a real toehold because that was about the only beer that was available in the marketplace. Sterling was still out there. Pabst Blue Ribbon was still out there. But at that time in the early 70s, Anheuser-Busch and Slits had really come to the forefront, but they had that set them back some, particularly Slits. Slits, I don't think Slits fully ever recovered from that strike. Anheuser-Busch did. But
you think that was like the nail in the coffin for Slits?
It was the start for sure. But we bounced back pretty quick. You know, it's just watching, in as many years as I've done this, watching the brands that have come and go. You know, you look at the beer industry now with all the craft beers. What's funny about the business now is that the business has evolved. We're now a beverage distributor, more or less. You know, we sell everything from soft drinks to water to energy drinks, hydration beverages, bottled water. I mean, you name it, we sell it. And we're sort of almost transforming back when back in the early 50s, except we're a beer distributor picking up soft drink and non-alcohol lines to accommodate the needs of the consumers. Whereas back in the early to mid 50s, we were transforming the grocery soft drink distributors from beer to being solely focused on beer. It's been fun to watch. It's been fun to see this third generation get involved in our business with you, your brother, and nephew. I've been blessed. My brother Bill has been by my side this whole time after Dad passed away, and he and I have worked very hard. So hopefully you boys can carry on the tradition one day.
I know Rossman and I have said many times when we have, maybe something happens, we got a couple of employees that go, and me and him are on the truck, Bill Jr. selling a sales route. We have often changed the name in our minds from Tarver Distributing to Tarver's Distributing.
Well, there's a lot of
Because
Tarvers.
we're the ones out there.
There's been a lot of Tarvers always around.
Oh, yeah.
Your Uncle Bob, which heads up our non-alcohol department. Bob went off to the military. He had a little growing up to do after high school and served over in Iraq for 4 years and came back, got involved in the company, and heads up our non-alcohol division. So, and that continues to grow. It's probably now 12 to 15% of our business.
I'm about to say, I really feel like you were talking about that strike in the 70s. And I can't help draw parallels to the COVID shutdowns and factories not going. You remember going through the warehouse and seeing just how little beer we were getting and all these outages of different products, Bud Light and Michelob Ultra. And it really felt like some of these smaller craft breweries, and especially non-alcohol brands, that really helped kind of bolster up, the company a little bit through that hard time.
Yeah, COVID obviously changed our world. I think it penalized a lot of our craft brewers, particularly because most of those beers are sold on premise and across the bar. Those establishments were closed, with the mandatory things coming out of Washington and the state of Tennessee, and most of the bars were not able to operate, even the restaurants. Fortunately, around here, our restaurants were able to open with distance requirements, and we did a lot at that time for some of our on-premise partners.
Oh, yeah, I remember the to-go beers.
Yeah, we had a lot of to-go beers. We tried our best to eat out a lot, catering meals, and several of these guys. Again, it's sort of almost the situation, what we did for them during COVID, they almost returned that favor back to us with this debacle we had in our marketing last year. They stood fast by our side during that challenging time, just as we stood by their side during those challenging times of the COVID.
And that's the power of community right there.
You can't say enough about the loyalty, and I guess it's maybe the 62 years we've been in business, but the amount of loyalty that we have with customers is almost unheard of now. I think you'd have to go search long and hard to find the dedicated retailers that we have here in other places. I'm sure they're out there.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at all of our customers, our chain customers, store managers, and that started going back and reflecting back on our people too. Our people have been very dedicated to the cause, weathered the challenges, and that's what makes the business so fun. And I'm looking forward to the next set of challenges. One thing Dad always taught me, and hopefully I've taught this third generation, you just sometimes when it gets hard, you just got to lean in, push through it, weather the storm, and wait for the clouds to clear and the sun to come back on your shoulders.
No, I think it's really easy when times are good, sales are up, everything's going right,
Yeah.
the crew's right. It's real easy to kind of puff yourself up and tell yourself how good of a job you are. But I think we're really defined about how we act in times of adversity, through strikes, through shutdown, employee loss, health concerns. So I think, moving, marketing debacles, I think moving forward from that and, how you pick yourself up, dust yourself off and move forward, I think that's really what's important.
Well, I think it defines a man's character. If you fold up like a wet bag, you just don't have the grit, what it takes to be successful, and success doesn't come easy. It takes hard work. It takes dedication, and it takes you doing what you say you will do and back it up. Words are empty unless people see action.
Yeah.
And if you show people you care, you can tell people all day long you care about their business, but until you show people you genuinely care about their welfare and their business, then it's just empty words.
Yeah. I think a lot of the point of us wanting to do this podcast is to reach out to our customers and kind of say, hey, we've grown as a company. We're more than just, a couple cases of Budweiser across the bar top anymore. We're all these different things. We're the different non-alcohol brands. We're these different craft breweries that we've supported throughout COVID. And I really hope that we can highlight that and talk about some of these beers, or non-alcohol drinks, be that tea or milk or water, spirits. We even got liquor now too. We're moving forward with that.
Just to show you how much the business has evolved, my last day on a beer route, I kept the ticket book. It was a 3-copy ticket book. We did everything by hand then. We didn't really have computers. Everything's done by computers now. We didn't have cell phones, GPS. My ticket book was maybe this big. And we probably sell more Bud Light packages today than I sold all beer packages total then when I came off the route. And that includes our draft brands. It just shows you how the business has evolved and the diversity of all the beer brands. And this is just Anheuser-Busch.
Yeah.
You look at all the brands, the craft brands, even some of the larger domestic brands. The beer business has evolved so much. It's just, you couldn't, if someone would go back there and come here now today, they wouldn't even recognize the beer business. I mean, if August Busch Jr. was alive today,
yeah,
or your grandfather Rabbit was alive, they would just shake their head and say, "What the heck?" But I think they would reflect and be very proud of what the industry's become.
Yeah. Well, Dad, I really appreciate you coming out this evening. You're going to be going back downstairs to go to bed here before too long. So thanks for letting us, film the podcast here. And it was great talking to you. And y'all, I hope you got to learn a little bit about us as a company. And, Dad, cheers.
Cheers. Cheers.